Welcome to an all-new season of Feminism Today, everyone. I'm Sophia Johnson in New York. New population data from 2022 show 22 states have an adult obesity prevalence at or above 35% compared to 19 states in 2021. According to the data from the Centers for Disease Control, or CDC, just 10 years ago, no state had an adult obesity prevalence at or above 35%. My guest this week is Sersie Blue, a faith-based health coach and co-author of the new book, Daniel Fast, Why You Should Do It Once, which explores how we can reconnect to our bodies and our own innate understanding of how we eat. Sersie Blue, welcome to Feminism Today.
Hi, nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, according to the CDC, we really need a comprehensive approach from the federal, state, and local governments to really shift the American psyche towards health and wellness, and really towards obesity prevention and treatment. My question is, why, despite all of that, all of what we know, are obesity rates in the US continuing to rise?
Well, obesity is a complex thing. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that the industry is kind of set up for us to fail, right? You have manufacturers that are making foods that are filled with sugar, salt, and oil. And these substances are addictive. And so, when you hear the concept, you can't eat one chip, it's literal, because they have chemicals that these chemists really put into the food that really hijack our palate and allow us to be addicted to the food. So you have that, and then you have the fact that food is everywhere, right? You go to the grocery store, you go to school, you go to a baseball game. You can't avoid it. We've also become a culture that's very stress-based. And so a lot of people are using food and using some of these highly processed foods to overcome stress and deal with emotional issues. And so you pile all of that together, and we have this kind of pseudo addiction to food and developing these habits where we're just eating all the time, and then it just piles up. So it's complicated. Yeah.
Now, in 2013, the American Medical Association officially changed its position on obesity. And I'm sort of introducing this to really agitate the argument that you're making, because there's a lot of back and forth going from the structures, the medical community, really advising medical practitioners that the condition, obesity as a condition, is a chronic disease requiring medical treatment, not an individual's failure. My question to you is, what is the fact-based conversation that we should really be having about obesity? And what is AMA, the American Medical Association, and these other institutional bodies getting right or wrong about this issue?
I mean, obesity is a disease from that perspective. But at the same time, I think socially, we have to support people to do the right thing, right? We have to put things in place that are going to allow people to make better choices. And so on one hand, it's there's a disease portion, but on the other hand, the environment supports us eating these foods that perpetuate obesity and chronic health issues and high blood pressure and diabetes. And so there's this balance. And so what we do in the Daniel Fast, Why You Should Only Do It Once, is that we bring in people's core values, right? Because a lot of times people are trying to diet, people are trying to figure out ways to eat well, but we take it from a different approach to find out what is a core value that someone values, and how can we allow them to use that as being a point of why they should or shouldn't eat anything, or why they should take care of their bodies.
I love that. Now, obviously, it's back to school season. Roughly 1 in 5 children in the United States between the ages of 2 and 19 are affected by obesity, meaning they have a body mass index at or above 95th percentile for their age. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about obesity as a potential health problem that needs to be fixed in the pediatric community. And also, how would you encourage parents to sort of talk about this issue of health and wellness?
Well, part of it is it's a generational pattern, right? And so we can't speak to children about health if we're not doing it ourselves. And so
Mm,
it's going to be us modeling it and showing, because a lot of times kids are really eating what their parents eat. And
right.
so this is why, the rise in obesity is so high for children, because when you look back in the previous years, we were eating more real food. And so we're getting to the point now in this generation where the parents are eating processed foods and the children are also eating processed food. So it's going to start from changes, I believe, in the adults, because if you think about it, children don't buy groceries. They don't really, have a say. We kind of control the environment as to what children do at home.
Yeah.
And so I think when children start seeing us appreciate real food and we're cooking real food at home and they're getting a taste for it and they're like, oh, vegetables taste gross. That is because they're not being exposed to it enough. So I think it's a family affair and it's not really a children issue as much as it is a generational issue that we all need to work on together.
What are some of the generational issues that are really setting us up on on this really crazy pathway?
I think we've gotten used to different sizes as time has gone on. We've gotten used to different sizes. But honestly, when it comes to generational, I think it's about, we look at people, for example, I know for myself, I had high blood pressure. My mother had high blood pressure. My grandmother had high blood pressure. And a lot of times we kind of think to ourselves, well, it's a genetic thing that's just being passed down. Same thing with obesity. But what we're not realizing, it's not so much that we're passing down genetics, but we're passing down lifestyle habits. And so
Mm,
it's not in the DNA most of the time. It's in the diet, it's in the dinners, it's in I ate what my grandmother ate. My grandmother ate what my, and so forth. And so we're passing these things down and it's feeling like it's a little bit of a lack of control. But part of it is if we look at it, we realize that genetics may load the gun, but lifestyle pulls the trigger. And we do have a lot of control by adapting some of our lifestyle habits to come with get another outcome.
let's talk about the F word. Can it be healthy and fat?
I mean, defining fat, I think it's different for different cultures because, the BMI, people talk about this a lot. It's different for different cultures, right? So a number might be higher for one, but if you're going to use it in terms of just a general sense of obese, whatever that is for each culture, it's never healthy, right? Obesity is puts your higher risk for chronic health issues like high blood pressure, diabetes, and even a lot of cancers. So I don't think it's healthy to be obese on any level. Now, I don't think it's healthy to fat shame or to allow people to be discriminated against, but I think it's a balance of providing the resources and the education so that people can live healthy lives without struggle.
Right. I think
Mm-hmm.
last season we had a guest on the show from the National Association for Fat Acceptance, and they were talking, sort of opened my ears and eyes to a lot of the negative language around fatness. And so my
Mm-hmm.
family's from the Caribbean, people are a little bit rounder,
Mm-hmm.
and our food is, we eat a little bit, our diets are a little bit different. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to talk, sort of double down on this sort of the cultural piece. When
Mm-hmm.
we strive for thinness, what I learned through this conversation
Mm-hmm.
with someone from the National Association of Fat Acceptance is that
Mm-hmm.
we're really reinforcing another form of stigma.
Yeah.
Do you see it as that? And how does the Daniel fast try to help us?
Yeah.
How does the Daniel fast help us reset, but at the same time, sort of accepting what is?
Yeah, and one of the things we talk about in the Daniel fast, why you should only do it once, is that it's really not about being skinny. It's really not about fitting
Mm,
back into those pair of jeans that you idolized back in your 20s and all of that. It's about coming to a approach from a values point where I want to be healthy so that I can show up as my best self. And at whatever size that lands, whatever outcome that is, that's what it is. But the motivation is more about being healthy so that I can live out and I could live out my divine purpose, but also that I could show up in my best self. Because
mm,
a lot of times we don't realize that when we are dealing with chronic health issues, when we're bogged down with appointments, when we're taking a lot of medications that have side effects, it does damper the way we show up, how we show up in our families, how we show up on our jobs, productivity, how we even just show up in general. And so the narrative isn't about getting skinny, but it's about being the best I can be with my health. And I think once you reframe that, you move away from diet culture, skinny, all of that, and you're now focusing, how can I be my best self concerning my health?
I really love that. I want to go back for a moment since you touched on it. Back in the 1990s, the head of CDC was a guy by the name of William Dietz. And he was the director of the division within CDC that was focused on obesity, and which he deemed to be an epidemic. I want to talk a little bit about some of the language and perceptions around health and body size that we see in the United States, and how the Daniel fast would be a useful tool to help us sort of move beyond these kind of narratives.
The Daniel fast comes from a point where we see health holistically, right? We're not coming from it just from one area. You need to get your numbers down. You need to do this. It's more of it's coming from a spiritual approach, right? And it's coming from a holistic approach. It's saying that you are made up emotionally, spiritually, physically. All of these things have to be healthy. And so, what we're not realizing a lot of times is that when we are unhealthy in our physical bodies, it spills over into our emotional health. There's a lot of studies that talk about depression and all kind of mental health issues that are stemmed from gut health, from chronic health issues. And so the view that the Daniel fast does is that it allows you to really take away all the toxic foods out of your body for a period of time so that you could kind of see, what does it feel like when I'm just eating real food? Because we've moved so much away from that we don't, sometimes you think you feel good until you start to take those foods from your body and you realize, wait a minute, I thought I was feeling good, but now I have a new baseline. And so it gives you that jumping off point.
So let's talk about why you and your co-author Gigi Carter are
Mm-hmm.
leaning into the Daniel fast. The Daniel fast departs from Christian, Judeo-Christian biblical
Mm-hmm.
theology. Can you tell our guests a little bit about why that point of departure is really significant? And can non-Christians participate in this?
Yeah, anybody can participate. It's coming from the popular story. Many people who are not even Christians know Daniel. He's famous, in every circle, it seems like. But it's really coming from the story of Daniel in the Bible, where he basically refused the king's diet, which was basically of wine and heavy meats and cheese. And when he did that and he only ate plants, he was actually healthier than his peers. And so we have Dr. Greger, which is a doctor that says that, the Daniel fast was the first clinical study for a plant-based diet. But when we fast forward it to today and we look at the studies around plant-based diet, we realize that what happened to Daniel is actual happening today, that a plant-based diet is the only diet that has been proven to reverse heart disease, to manage weight, to manage diabetes, and to cure or to manage or prevent certain cancers. And so what we look at as an ancient tale in the Bible has actually been proven by science today. And so we're rejuvenating this story and making it applicable in modern times to say, listen, you could be a Daniel in your own time by refusing the king's diet, which we refer to as the standard American diet.
One of the through lines in your book, the new book, The Daniel Fast, is the idea that one, we can and should or can or should connect our health to our divine purpose, which is what you've been
Mhm.
talking about.
Mhm.
But two, seeing our health as a spiritual practice can actually shift the outcome, the desired outcome.
Mhm.
This sounds so obvious, but it's something that you really had to lay out. And I wanted to know a little bit, talk a little bit about the data behind
Mhm.
behind this framing.
Well, there's one data that's out there, and it's when people attach meaning to getting healthy, it shifts the game. There was a study that they did in the rural South that basically had people do a vegan diet, but they called it a vegan diet, and then they had the same group, a different group in the South Bible Belt, do it and call it the Daniel fast. And what they found was, when people attached meaning and faith and community to that, they had a 98% compliance rate.
Wow.
So that just shows you that getting healthy, when you connect it to people's faith, to their core values, to their community, to a higher calling, that people are more compliant because it's not about counting calories. It's purpose driven.
I want to pivot a little bit and sort of to put the Daniel fast up against what is really been the overwhelming thing in the press over the past year.
Mm-hmm.
We have to talk about the new class of semaglutide medications that have been dropping weight off people's bodies like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
The CDC report actually highlights the need for and the support for stigma-free obesity prevention, including medication and surgery. It's outlined in their press release. The off-label use of diabetes medications for weight loss has become increasingly popular. My question to you is what message do you have for people sort of dealing with obesity and thinking about this class of drug against a Daniel fast? Why lean into the Daniel fast when it doesn't have to be that difficult?
Yeah, well, you know what it is. It doesn't have to be that difficult, but what we have to remember is that when we take medications for high blood pressure or diabetes or even for obesity, it is actually not curing the thing, right? It's not getting to the root cause. And so what happens is you end up with the illness that you have. You're taking the medication, but there's also side effects that a lot of people don't talk about that come with these medications. So on one hand, it seems like, okay, I'm just having the magic pill. But when you dig deeper, it really isn't, because number one, it's a side effect. And then number two, is actually not curing the problem. It's just solving the symptoms. And so when you go back to a whole food plant-based diet, which is what the Daniel fast is, it's number one, you're not getting the side effects. Number two, you are dealing with the root cause of it. So instead of just dealing with the symptoms of high blood pressure, now you're actually reversing the high blood pressure. So you're getting a better bang for your buck by leaning into real food that you would have to eat anyway, but then you're also going to have it trickling the fact that when you eat a whole food plant-based diet, not only are you solving obesity, not only are you dealing with your high blood pressure, but it's the same diet that prevents cancer and prevents diabetes and prevents Alzheimer's and aging and so many other things. So you're actually getting the magic pill without even having the magic pill.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the journaling. I have your first book. I'm still waiting in the mail for the second book. But one of the things that I really love about your work is this idea that journaling is self-reflective, but also just going inward and thinking about your emotions is truly a purposeful way to be. And I wanted to know, how you and your co-author Gigi Carter sort of came up with this idea of journaling your way through journaling your way towards health and wellness. I love that.
We realize, and I know from my own personal experience, because my story started with the Daniel fast. And so what I realized though, is that I was using food to self-medicate, right? So if I was stressed or if I was lonely or if I was dealing with some kind of trauma, that I was actually using food instead of using a healthy resource, and so what the journaling does is that it helps you process your emotional piece around food and around weight gain, because a lot of times it's not about the food, it's what the food represents, right? And so if everybody would just put the food down, if it was that easy, but we have emotional attachments to food, we have triggers to foods, we eat food when we're stressed, we eat food when we're unhappy. And so the journal allows you to process those emotions and see what's actually happening, so that you can get off of autopilot and then make intentional decisions.
So I guess my question is, what does chocolate covered pretzel represent?
Well,
I don't know what it represents. I need you to tell me what it represents.
Yeah, what it represents. It depends, because for someone, let's just use an example. Let's just say someone who has a high stress job, right? And they're coming home, and that chocolate covered pretzel represents a relief, because it gives you that high. It gives you that feeling of, oh, I got something. But what it's doing over time when you're constantly eating them, it is packing on the pounds. It is bringing up your blood pressure. It is doing these things. But for you at the time, it was just a stress relief.
Yeah.
And so if we can find other ways to say, you know what can I lean into when I'm stressed and I come home at night? And it's not the pretzel, because the pretzel is going to have other side effects. What else can I lead into? Can I lean into prayer? Can I lean into meditation? Can I
Ah,
do something that's going to elevate me and actually solve the problem? Or am I going to just keep eating the pretzels that really aren't solving the problem? So it's like a bottomless pit, and you just keep going
yeah,
to it when it relieves you in the moment, but it doesn't actually solve it long term.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can you get kids to journal around food? I'm just wondering about that. How, one of the challenges that parents face is how to talk to their kids about weight
Mhm.
and health without perpetuating these very harmful stereotypes
Yeah.
or inadvertently promoting a diet culture. Can
Yeah.
kids journal? Would you encourage kids to journal on the
Yeah,
Daniel
you know
fast?
what? I think kids, it's for example, I think part of it, like I said, is that it's allowing kids to enjoy real food. Because I think
Mm,
no one ever over gorgeous on broccoli, and it just doesn't happen. Like, think about it. You'll never say, "Oh, I just had to eat broccoli when I'm stressed," because the nature of real food is that it's so fibrous, that it just satisfies our body on a cellular level, that we
yeah.
don't overindulge in it. So I think part of the thing with children and body images is allowing them to fall in love with real food.
Mm,
It's when we fall in love with the processed food and the sugary foods and those things that are feeding into that part of our brain, that dopamine in our brain to give us that high, is where children can get involved. But also, too, it's helping children learn coping skills. Kids
mm.
get stressed too. Kids come home, breaking up with friends and girlfriends and boyfriends and things like that. And it's about also teaching them that food is to nourish the body and not to be used for emotional things, and that we can model that, but we could also teach that. I think that's a healthy balance for children to know.
How do we then, on the same issue of children, 'cause I know there are a lot of people, a lot of viewers out there who have
Mhm,
kids and the kids are
mhm,
back to school and the kids had a long summer of doing nothing and now they're back into the thing.
mhm,
How do you talk to children and have a safe conversation about healthy body?
mhm.
Is Daniel Fast a healthy and appropriate tool for an entire family? Can you do this with children?
You could do this with food, because what the Daniel fast is actually just a whole food plant-based diet. Basically, it's legumes, whole grains, fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, seeds. Now, mind you, if you're feeding a child a whole food plant-based diet, you have to make some adjustments. Kids are going to have higher fat. Kids are going to have, there's certain things that you have to tweak, which you could talk to your pediatrician if you have one that's plant-based, or there's a lot of resources out there. But this is something that the whole family can do. And as a matter of fact, it's more beneficial when the whole family is doing it, because then
Mm,
it reinforces all of the
right.
habits. So.
Right. I love that. You and your co-author, Gigi Carter, have created this really strong community through Healthy for My Purpose
Mhm,
Academy, your
mhm,
podcast, your newsletter, the boot camps you're famous for, which I
mhm,
participated in 1 years ago.
mhm,
I'm just curious, though, about the public's reaction to your work in this sort
mhm.
of semi-glutide pro fat acceptance culture. How are people responding to your work?
We've had a lot of people who reached out to us and said, you know what, I never thought to connect my food to my faith. I
Mm,
never thought to do it. And so for so long, people were struggling and dieting and doing all these things and never thought to connect them. There was a study that was done, and I'm just using this as an example, that
yeah.
said 80% of Black women use faith to make important decisions in their life.
Ah.
And so we said to ourselves, wait a minute. If women are using faith to make decisions about their marriage and their next job and where they're going to travel and all of these things, why are not using it for their faith and for their health?
Yeah.
And so that's why women are connecting with it, because of the fact that faith is very important. And so channeling it into the faith is giving them more power. They feel more in control. They feel like, I could do this just like how they would do in other area of their lives. So actually, a lot of people have been like, whoa, I never thought to connect the two. And it's been very powerful.
Why is it that so many diets actually fail? What is it about the Daniel fast that is,
Mhm.
why is this a more sustainable approach to healthy living, for example?
Yeah, it's more sustainable because it's not about depriving yourself of calories. It's about just eating real food. You're not counting calories, you're not watching what you eat. It's really just about eating real food. Now, there is an adjustment because you have to let your palate um, acclimate itself and adjust, because a lot of times when you're eating all these sugary things, and then you bite an apple, you're like, oh, it's not that sweet. But you have to, and this is why the Daniel fast, we have a 4-week jumping off point so that you can kind of detox from all of that. And then once you start loving the flavors of real food, it just becomes natural, because you could eat until you're full and you're not really focusing on what I can't eat, what I can't have, but you're just able to just enjoy food for what it is.
What have you learned about health and wellness from the COVID pandemic? What was a big takeaway for you?
Well, Gigi and I started Healthy for My Purpose in the middle of the pandemic, because when we found out that people with comorbidities were at a higher risk of complications or death, we were like, wait a minute, if we have the answer for the comorbidities, if you get rid of the comorbidities, then this wouldn't be a problem. And so that's where this whole Daniel fast, why we should only do it once, comes in. It's being able to deal with the chronic health issues, right? High blood pressure, obesity, diabetes, and all of those other things. It made us realize that we need to be healthy before the pandemic.
Yeah.
We need to be healthy. It just made us realize that our health is so much more important. And these chronic health issues that we have normalized in our lives can really be crucial in those seasons. And so being forwardly active to say, you know what, I want to dig deeper to see, can I get off of some of these medications? Can I solve some of these root cause problems? I think that's what the pandemic kind of highlighted, that we need to address these chronic health issues.
I want to go back to where we started, this idea, this information that's coming out from the CDC that more and more states are seeing evidence of obesity, when 10 years ago, that just wasn't the norm. For the 6th year in a row, Finland is the world's happiest country, and that's according to the World Happiness Report rankings, based largely on life evaluations. And this is more so in the Nordic countries, in Denmark, Iceland, Sweden. Obesity is quite low and people are quite happy. I'm obviously, we can't all move to Finland. Is there something we can both learn from these types of rankings, and importantly, can you offer some guidance on why we have so much but so little?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think our culture is fast paced. It's, microwaved. It's, people are driving everywhere. People aren't walking anymore. People are eating a lot of processed foods. I mean, the amount of animal intake that we eat on average here in the United States is probably, the highest amongst, the rest of the world. And so, we're in a position where we're, in a sense, what else can happen when we're kind of overindulging? And so I think there's a lot of people that are trying to call people back to real food, call people back and say, hey, step back a bit, and I think that's what the Daniel fast does. It's kind of our way back to say, let's go back to real food. Let's go back to walking outside and exercising and having fresh air, and ultimately tying the fact that you being healthy is a spiritual practice. So something that you do daily, right? A lot of times people are like, oh, I'm going to, we say grace over our food, like flippantly, and we're like praying over like, some hot dogs and fries. And so it's just making us being more intentional in the moment to say, is what's on my plate at the end of my fork worthy to say grace? Where is the food? And it's multi-layered. Like, how did the food even get to my plate? Was it done ethically? All of these questions that you can ask yourself just from making it a spiritual practice of saying, is this worthy to say grace? And then when you start to think and all of those things go on, you have a moment to make changes just by incorporating it into your spiritual practice.
Sersie Blue is a faith-based health coach and co-author of the new book, Daniel Fast, Why You Should Do It Once. It was such a pleasure speaking with you, Sersie. Thank you so much for this conversation and helping us to kick off season 4 of Feminism Today. Good luck with the book.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me.